Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Green Week event, Making Money Through Landscape Restoration, How Nature-Based Solutions Can Make the Countryside Thrive. So first of all, welcome to all of you for being here today under quite difficult circumstances. Hardly any public transport in Brussels, no trains in Belgium. I think all our speakers have arrived now from across Europe, from the Netherlands, from Spain, from the UK. And we also would like to welcome the participants who join us online. There's a web stream, so we hope that in that way we do reach the people who also were interested to be here today but couldn't travel here. I would also like to thank the Belgian Science Policy Office, who have helped us in preparing for this event and who are hosting us here today, and especially Hilde Eggermont, who has been very, very important in. So today's event, ICN has organized this event to highlight the opportunities of ecosystem restoration and to show the multiple benefits of nature-based solutions and new partnerships for action across Europe. I think that all of us are aware that healthy ecosystems are the basis of a sustainable economy, also for the well-being of people. But unfortunately, still, we see that there is a lot of invisibility of the value of nature, that we need to work on improving the understanding of what ecosystems mean for society, for the economy. So giving a monetary value to nature, to natural capital, is a way to put it on an equal footing with social and financial capital. It can help companies to include nature's values in their balance sheets and in their accounting systems, but also can help governments and investors to improve how they make their decisions. At the same time, it means we have to work towards integrating nature's values in economic sectors, mainstreaming it in our economic models. And we're very pleased today with a group of extraordinary speakers who will share with us a group of initiatives on how we can inspire action to promote land stewardship, to invest in large but also how to finance this. So there will be attention for innovative business models, entrepreneurial thinking, for innovation holders at local and regional level, which is essential for the success of effective ecosystem restoration. For ICN, ecosystems are at the heart of the work we do around the world. Nature-based solutions, which we consider the protection, the restoration, the enhancement of ecosystems functions, is for us one of the main pillars of our global work to respond to societal challenges such as climate change, water security, food security, energy security. And to give you a few examples of the work we do, there is the Bonn Challenge, an initiative that was launched in 2011 with support of the German government, which aims to restore by 2020 150 million hectares of degraded land around the world. And this initiative was also endorsed at the UN Climate COP last year in December, and actually was extended to achieve 350 million hectares by 2030. This is an initiative that ICN supports governments and stakeholders around the world with in terms of assessing priorities for restoration. And currently there are about 90 million hectares of pledges made by countries and partners outside of Europe. So that may be also an interesting point for discussion, how Europe can take a major role in this as well. ICN also works with the private sector, with individual sector. One example is Holcim, one of the world's major cement producers, who have invested direct resources in improving the landscapes, in restoration, in improving watershed management. So there is a great example of landscape, not only to improve biodiversity, but also many other benefits of ecosystems. The ICN National Committee in France has published a report last year for the Climate COP on examples of nature-based solutions for tackling climate change. In December last year, ICN started a 5-year partnership with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development to support companies in addressing global challenges such as climate change and ecosystem restoration by looking at the valuation of nature. And I'm sure that's also one of the topics we will discuss here today. So the last point I wanted to highlight is that ecosystem restoration is of tremendous value as well for achieving a range of EU policies. Of course, to start with the EU Biodiversity Strategy to 2020, and in particular Target 2 on restoration, where the objective is to restore at least 15% by 2020. But also it can help to improve the implementation of our... Also, it can help... At the same time, there is also great untapped potential in other policy areas. We're very pleased that the European has made nature-based solutions part of their Horizon 2020 research program to 2020. And there's also untapped potential in the EU. So with that, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Joop Hazenberg, who will introduce to you our speakers, and I wish you a fruitful exchange. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chantal. I'll be your moderator for this morning. And before I give the floor to Marta, I want to just say something about the program. So the idea is to be really interactive this whole session, not only during the plenary part, the next hour or so, but also during the breakout groups and then the plenary feedback. Luckily, all speakers managed to get here despite the traffic problems, but the last speaker, Eva Meyerhofer from the European Investment Bank, she will attend only virtually because there were no trains running from Luxembourg to Brussels, but we'll do this after the breakout session. We can also tweet. The hashtag is EU Green Week. There is a Wi-Fi connection here. It's called Belspo Guest. It's the Wi-Fi network, and the password is Belspo1050, all with small letters. The first part is the four keynote speakers, all 10 minutes, so please respect that time limit. The first one is Marta Sobira from the Catalonian government, responsible for environmental sustainability policies. And then we have Willem Verweda, CEO at Commonland, Ilke Bosman, Enterprise Director at Rewilding Europe. And these keynote sessions with Johnny Hughes, who is CEO at the Scottish Wildlife Trust. So yeah, first yes.
Thank you very much. I have to. Do you know where is it? Yes. Well, first of all, this session. Thank you very much to the IUCN and also to the Belgian Biodiversity Platform and all of you who are attending this meeting. I'm going to talk about a study that the government of Catalonia worked on about the social and economic impacts of protected areas in Catalonia. We realized that in these recent years, in fact, the protected areas system in Catalonia, it's been running for almost 40 years, but well, the first natural parks that were declared by the government of Catalonia were in the mid-80s, and there were others that were older. But the natural protected area system was more from the beginning of the 90s. And we realized that we had a lot of studies about flora, about fauna, about all the things related to ecosystem or ecology, related to about the social and economic impact of these protected areas. And at the beginning, I don't know if in other countries, system of natural protected areas, not everybody was happy about that. There were many mayors, many landowners that felt a little bit threatened by that could affect their properties. And with the time, this way of thinking has been changing. But we realized that we didn't have numbers, we didn't have a real objective study about this social and economic impact. So, evaluate the effect of a natural protected area, mostly a natural park, on the economy and the society of the territories of Catalonia. At a starting point, the data, we thought that would be useful for the effective management and planning of the protected area system of Catalonia, but also that could drive strategies for the revitalization and enhancement of the region's economy regarding the protection of natural heritage. We were talking, we wanted this study to be done by someone that was not suspect of two ecologists. I mean, since we wanted this study to be really it can be done, or what the natural protected areas means for a territory, we talked to a bank, to a very important bank in Catalonia, La Caixa, and also with a group of consultants that were very happy to work with us. And then we selected 16 that were analyzed under different categories to assess protection category versus economic activity generated. Here you can see the map of, I think later on, no, well, the map of Catalonia. We are in the northwest of the Peninsula Iberica, close. This is France, this is the Mediterranean, this is the rest of Spain. And we have the 32% of our territory in Nature 2000, so it's quite a lot, more than the medium of Europe. And then we have this basic natural protected area system, and then the natural parks. I think that in another map we will see the difference. But here you can see the difference. There is one national park. There are, I think, 12. I think some partial natural reserve categories. We focus on the gross added value and the number of jobs. Focus on the gross related to existing protected areas and in activities regarding to the management of the protected areas themselves. You can see here the different sectors that we were analyzing and seeing. One of the cases, I think that it's not very well explained in this presentation, we wanted to analyze some protected areas with a management body and some others without management body, to see if the management body helped to improve the results on these areas. So the socioeconomic impact generated directly and indirectly include this that you can see here: job creation and revenue generated directly by the activity, revenue and job generated by business related to those activities, and also economic value and job created as a result of the consumption activities of the employees and the staff members of the activities directly and indirectly related to each sector. The 16 protected areas that we assessed generate 192 million per annum in terms of gross added value. You can see here the distribution among service sector, management of the natural protected areas, and agriculture. And as main find, management of the natural sector generates 1.26% of the gross added value of tourism in Catalonia. We wanted to compare with some very iconic symbols of tourism in Catalonia. For example, this means 1.5 times the revenue generated by the Gala Dalí Foundation, which is the museum of Salvador Dalí in Figueras. It is one of the most visited museums, or I think it's the second after the Barça Museum, the Barça Football Club, which is the first one, I think. Well, it's our world. So the first one, Barça, the second, Dalí. And also these numbers show that it's 2.6 times the revenue generated by the National Art Museum of Catalonia and 5% of the revenue generated by the cultural heritage of Catalonia as a whole. By the cultural heritage that we are using more is this, that for every euro invested in a protected area, it's almost 9 euros of gross added value sector related activities. So I think this is quite important for public policies, and when you are explaining someone why it's important to protect a natural area, of course, for all the ecosystem values and biological and everything, but at the same time, it can be also a good opportunity for some territories. The difference in budgetary allocation in different protected areas have a direct effect on the volume and types of management activities conducted in each protected area, both in terms of activities directly related to conservation of the area and other kinds of measures related to the socioeconomic aspects of the surrounding areas. The 16 areas studied generate 5,110 jobs associated with the activities that we studied. We see that the socioeconomic impact is especially significant. Socioeconomic impact economic activities. For example, we realize that in fact in the Costa Brava, for example, that the natural parks of course have an impact there, but it's not the main one. So those areas would be also quite rich without a natural protected area, because rich tourism sector in an order of or related to sun and beaches, and not only the natural areas. But also it's very important in the counties far away from Barcelona that have a rather less diversified economic structure. Also that protected areas generate complementarities and synergies between the primary sector, agriculture and farming, and the services sector, mostly tourism, which the protected areas management bodies usually endeavor to boost through a wide range of tools: direct financial support, infrastructure investment, labeling and branding, local product trade fairs, and a lot of more. And still a long way to go to continue exploring and developing the potential of protected areas as key elements in the potential revitalization, placing special emphasis on their role to provide the backbone of the territory and to guarantee social and territorial cohesion. I think that it's an exercise for us. We are committed to continue developing this information and to work through it to have the most of our natural protected areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. We'll hear more about this in the discussion afterwards on Catalonia. And I'll go quickly to Willem Verda from Commonland. It's right here. Because we have the slide summary here. Is it already ready? Kun je het already... Je had een filmpje toch ook niet? Ja. Even kijken. En hoe heet hij? How does it? Oh yeah, probably.
Being here, and sorry for the delay. We were probably one of the people who came a bit late due to traffic jams. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the framework of landscape restoration we have developed over the last few years with the Rotterdam School of Management, IUCN, and many others. Basically, you know the story. Land use, biodiversity, more land use over the last 250 years, and we also know that there are many policies and many actions on the ground, but even much more policies on paper. So when I left IUCN as a director several years ago, 4 years ago, I was thinking, you know, there's only one big project in the world, in the Lustplateau, China, where you can find an example of huge scale restoration. This area is more than the size of Belgium. It has been restored. You know, the ecological functionality has been restored since 1995, 1994. So we know it's working. Also with satellite images, we know it's working. And we know that the challenge is how to restore large-scale degraded areas. Take the example of Spain, where more than 10 million hectares are severely degraded. They lose 25 tons of soil every year, and the country is almost a desert. Almost a desert. But it's a nasty situation. So how to deal with that? So if we look into the Chinese example, we see that the business case there is very easy to find. It is the sediment flow into the Yellow River. That stopped. And with those costs, they could restore the area, which is basically as large as France, and they're still working to restore that area. And of course, they face a lot of challenges, but many social, environmental, and financial returns were coming back. So when I was thinking about how to create a model for large investable landscape restoration projects, I realized that basically it's not there. Lots of talking, lots of conferences, lots of policies, lots of action plans. But what is happening on the ground, it's small. And most of them are grants or public money driven. So it's not sustainable. While the returns that we returns looking for pipeline of investable landscape restoration projects, but they don't have the right framework. They don't have a way of how to frame that, or they don't understand it. They have understand it. They invest in ecosystem restoration projects, and so I took some time off in 2012 and was trying to find an answer to that question. And of course, we all know that maximization of return on investment per hectare leads to degradation. We, as ecologists, know that. But for many people out there, you know, they don't know that. They don't understand it, and they're not aware of it. So how to make that bridge? That's quite difficult. And how to make that bridge with people in the field, farmers and landowners. First of all, we need to understand that we need one approach of landowners, of local people, entrepreneurs in the field, investors, business people, business schools even, the media, government experts, NGOs, and so forth. And if you bring that down, if you bring the basis of landscape degradation down, you can basically see 4 losses. It's a loss of biodiversity, a loss of jobs, a loss of economic activity, and probably the most important loss is a loss of purpose, so loss of meaning, people. If you go to those degraded areas, you see that they're abandoned, people are jobless, there are almost no economic activities, and the topsoil has been lost for sometimes decades and sometimes for centuries, and the canopy is gone. And sometimes for easy, relatively easy, with the right skill set and the right financial and technical tools to restore those areas. We need to have an ecological framework and ecological thinking behind it. This is an example of India. And if you turn the 4 losses around, you get 4 returns. Oh. So I'm talking with only one. Oh. Okay, that's nice. So I'm at slide 12 now. Okay, can you give me another 10 minutes? That's interesting. Ah. You probably, yeah, you quit it and... But maybe a nice story. As I to visiting farmers in many countries, but also went to London and New York to visit investors in many countries, but also went and asked them, ecological restoration projects, and I explained it a bit, and then they said, listen, guy, you ask us to you don't provide us with an exit strategy. You bring us multi-stakeholders, so all kind of people in the landscape. That means high risks. And by the way, how can we be sure that we will get our money back? So what is the return on investment? It's probably very low. And why should we talk to ecologists? I mean, we need to talk to financial people with the right skill set. So there are 4 reasons that they were not into this topic. And I thought, wow, this is not the way of dealing. My communication is not the good communication to convince or to interact and to convince those people. And so that was one of the reasons I thought I need to do something about my communication. I need to translate my ecological expertise in a language that everyone could understand. And basically that's what I did. Yeah. I'll get some more minutes, very friendly. So basically what I did is, so I started, so this was my story. Yes, land use and biodiversity, it's going down over the last 250 years. We know why. Yes, there are many policies. It's not landing on the ground, so there's a lot of money. It's not landing to where it should land. Another thing, we know it's possible. That has been already proven by the Lust Plateau, an area the size of Belgium. Yes, we can do it. Yes, we can do it also. Yes, we can do it. Yes, we can do it. It's filmed. John Liu, my friend here, our ambassador, has filmed. John Liu. We know that business is about maximization or return on investment per hectare. That's business as usual. And that's that is causing this degradation industry. But we also know, looking towards the Lust Plateau, that there are huge returns came back from that restoration program. It started with a 500 million loan of the World Bank. But what is the difficulty and how to build a pipeline for investors of large-scale projects? And I'm talking really large scale, more than 100,000 hectares, because then the ecology is going to investors. We need to get hold on this for investors. We need one approach and one language that everyone understands. And that's why I came to the idea of, let's first dig into what degradation really means. And that is about 4 losses: biodiversity, jobs, economic activity, and meaningfulness. Inspiration, the most important one, social, natural, and financial capital. We also know that the first 3 returns will bring down and we know that's technically possible. We can measure it, and we can bring it back to the ground, because 4 returns should be delivered by a zoning of that in a landscape, whether you're in Catalonia or in Belgium or in Holland or in Colombia, you need to think in 3 zones: a natural zone, ecosystem services; a combined zones, ecosystem services and productivity, agroforestry; and an economic zone, sustainable agriculture and other activities. So that is all possible. And you can measure that. You can put a value and a cash system on it. Look at this. The investments can be identified for each zone. The governments and grants funding as well. Those will give 4 returns, and you can measure that in cash and in value, all in euros. So you can have a convincing master plan telling story. But how to convince people in the land, on the countryside? And that is through a process of the theory U, to create a common intent and do a very good scouting and criteria setting. And that's what we are doing at Common Land now in 4 setting. I will talk more about it in the breakout session. The role there, what we do, is having a stakeholder mobilization, bringing that up, a business development process, a knowledge and learning and the finance and investment specification. We create master plans of in a project of 2 or 3 years. We think in minimum 20 years. And that really opens up farmers to think differently. So what is Common Land? Common Land was founded in 2013 by IUCN and the Rotterdam School of Management and has some other mission partners, among them also the Presencing Institute of the U-Curve at MIT. We contribute to the Bond Challenge, and we work in those countries, as I just mentioned, South Africa, Spain, Australia. We are now scouting into Colombia and the Netherlands, and we are working to set up an academy for business and landscapes. We have a team of 30 people now, and we are developing an investment fund. And now I will end with a small video, and I hope it will work. It will not work. Can you switch it on? It's only 1 minute. Oh. Is that possible? Oh. You have it? No, it's not possible? Oh, we do it after the break. Thank you very much. We'll end with a small. We'll end with a. End with a small.
Explanation.
We'll end.
And we now go to another fascinating.
We'll end with a small.
Another fascinating.
We'll end with a.
Approach or different vision on.
We'll end.
About Europe and
The small will end with.
I hope this works easier.
The small will end with.
There. Is it there? The buttons. I'll just do the pre-testing. It's there. Ilko. Oh, here. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, my apologies for the delay. I was partly guilty of coming in late. Also, Netherlands. This works. Yes, it works. I'll tell you a bit. What Rewilding Europe is and how our vision on different financing and different on. Let me see if this scale works. Well, as the biggest is from a change in Europe. And it's a change that has been seen in different ways in other continents, but we see a change. The most important thing is that Europe is changing, is suffering from land changing, is suffering common lands in our approach and our vision. Although but I think we move the same objectives and we work off the same opportunities and trends that we signal. So young generations leaving the countryside for the city. The countryside is abandoned. And in the meanwhile, what you see, there's a lot of biodiversity loss. While the countryside is abandoned and there nature can have its way, maybe more because people are not living there anymore, but they're generally degraded systems. You also see an intensification of agricultural land because it's much more condensed than it used to be, which on both sides causes biodiversity loss. Sorry, this one's not learning along. So, what we also see is that intensive grazing over the last 10,000 years has had a great effect on the biodiversity of the 50 million years before, because over 50% of the biodiversity is depending on natural systems, natural grazing, rather than intense systems. Very much an opportunity-based initiative, and we believe that we have to take whatever is happening and not try to go against it and try and change it, because it's but we believe that there are opportunities in each of these threats. The biggest thing is that in the Natura 2000 network, which is a large area of protected networks, it has been calculated how much money is needed to protect and govern all that land, and there isn't such money available for nature conservation in Europe. So we thought, if we want to do this, we have to find other ways of financing this. There's no way we can do it with
traditional grant money, subsidies, life programs, etc. There's too much area to cover than in the traditional way. A lot of people having more need for breakaways and free time than they are then visiting. That is an opportunity. Secondly, wildlife watching, wildlife tourism, again, an interest in nature, because nature maybe becomes more scarce. People are more interested in actually experiencing nature in Europe. Organized societies are also more and more, which you would not expect, but research showed that they're more susceptible to wildlife, they're more open to wildlife, and actually there's more and more interest in nature. That's been the reason for a couple of organizations, people from organizations I should say. Rewilding Europe was founded by 4 individuals from these organizations, Wild Wonders of Europe, WWF Netherlands, Ark Nature and Conservation Capital. They founded Rewilding Europe in 2011 based on a vision where we say we want to make Europe a wilder place. It's a very broad vision, it's deliberately that way, and it means a wilder place means that on a scale of wildness where 0 is an urban area and 10 is the wildest area you can find maybe in Laponia, making it a wilder place can be from 0 to 1 or from 9 to 10. There's a way of rewilding, of making Europe a wilder place. It's not limited to vast wilderness areas. It's not limited to 10. From 9 to free areas. You can do it anywhere, and that's based on our vision. We want to make it a wilder place, and that's an important one because it brings a business model, and natural processes are generally cheaper than managed processes. Bringing back the variety of life for all us to enjoy. I think the enjoyment factor is very important in it. But more important, 9 to 10 in those areas. So we want to bring people an alternative to their traditional farming, cattle herding, etc., that they were used to, which is not reliable or not economically reliable anymore. But we want to offer them a living from the wild rather than from exploring nature. We do this in 3 components: rewilding, which I already explained, communication, and enterprise. And that brings back these elements of the vision, where in rewilding we say we want to restore more natural processes nature, and our objective is to do this in 2022. That was 10 years after we started with our first project. We want to support wildlife comeback, which we believe is the soul of European nature and is what the most value is in wildlife comeback, because there's the most value to enjoy and to explore economic opportunity. We start to explore economic. I believe behind that is that once you develop businesses that use nature, natural capital, and inherent interest to protect this product and even further develop it. If your business model is based on exploiting nature or natural capital, then you have an interest in protecting it, but if you protect it too much, you lose your income. Well, in this case we say if the income is not on the exploration, more on the exploration, but not on the use of the natural capital, then there is much more interest in maintaining it and even growing it. We do this through a number of innovative business models. I will tell a lot more about it in the breakout session. One of those is Rewilding Europe Capital, which is our Rewilding Enterprises Investment Fund. We've currently funded that with $500,000 of starting capital as a pilot facility, and we're now working facility managed by the EIB. We're working with the European Investment Bank, injection, which will greatly improve our abilities to finance rewilding enterprises. European Wildlife Bank is a good example. I'll also get into that a little bit more later on, is where we say that there is a value in wildlife, and if we can increase the value in wildlife, there's also a value in banking with animals rather than with money. Currently we finance 16 enterprises in 5 countries over the last 2 years with our pilot facility, and with the scale up that we envisage in Rewilding Europe Capital, we hope to do maybe 10 to 20 fold of that. Last pillar of our initiative is communication, where we say that people want to enjoy the wild, and we want to educate people to give them interest in the wild. It means that communication is an equally important component next to rewilding and enterprise. Where for some organizations, our initiative capital very evil, for us it's one of the 3 pillars, and it's equally important. And we do this through large capital. You know, as you might have seen, Wild Wonders of Europe is one of our partners. They have a great network and a great database of images. The mass communication story, of course, it's also about talking to people and knowing to people. So there's a twofold ground, and it's mass communication to reach the wilder public and show them how beautiful Europe actually is and what it has to offer. Areas that we work in at the moment, Western Iberia at the border of Portugal and Spain is one of our pilot areas. Second is the Velebit Mountains. The Central Apennines, wild heart of Italy, in the Abruzzo. Lower Delta and the Black Sea, Romania. The Southern Carpathians, more towards the northwest of Romania. Beautiful mountainous area where we've a bison project, and there's now a huge herd of bison living in the wild there, European bison. Eastern Carpathians, European bison. Very untouched still. The Rhodope Mountains, Eastern Rhodopes, all the way at the border between Bulgaria and Greece, where there's large populations of vultures. The Oder, border of Germany and Poland. And our newest area is Lapland in northern Sweden, which is an area that has huge potential already and is already very wild. But as we see, is already let's say natural resource use threats, and that's why this for us is also an interesting area. We see that we try to balance all these areas between rewilding challenges, maybe more enterprise challenges, and we try to find a balance in that. What we do in these 10 areas is we call them pilots. These 10 areas for us are an example of what we see how rewilding should work, could work. We've given ourselves 10 years to develop these into pilot areas that show people what can be different. We're not saying that we want to rewild areas of total of 1 million hectares, is that we hope to again that it adapts a new approach in nature conservation. And it's up to you to decide whether that's Europe's biggest wilderness, a wilder cultural landscape, or maybe a little bit of both. Yeah, where we say hunting and gathering has been done for ages, and we want to find a new way of hunting and gathering. Yeah, where we... I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilko, for sharing these insights and these beautiful pictures of Europe's wild. Makes me want to go on holiday right away. The fourth and last speaker is Johnny Hughes of the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Just to see if he's going to talk about natural capital, so a very different subject. I'll just see if your slides are somewhere around. Any idea what they look like? Scottish Wildlife Trust.
Great, thank you. Seems to be working. It's a relief. Morning, everybody. it's been obviously a very challenging day for many of you travelling from far and wide. I was thinking, as I was listening to those inspiring presentations, I probably should have been on first, to be honest, because I'm going to set a little bit of context and do a bit of a kind of general canter around the concept of natural capital. And actually, what we've seen there is putting the concept of natural capital into action. And I think it's really, really important that we actually begin to see some action on the ground. I was just speaking to Willem before, but in the break, saying that we've kind of got to the end of the runway, I think, with the development of this concept of natural capital and beginning to realise some of the opportunities that you've been seeing. But the plane has not quite yet taken off, and we're just at the kind of takeoff point, I feel. And in the next few years, I'm hoping to see significant amount of investment in our natural environment and the stocks of our natural capital globally. So what I wanted to do this morning was just to today and canter through these slides fairly quickly, give you some reflections of what some of the conclusions were from the World Forum on Natural Capital that took place in Forum on Natural Capital today and months ago. But first of all, a definition, because I don't think we've had a definition of natural capital yet this morning. And it's really important, the difference between the stocks and the flows here. So that natural capital can be seen as the stock of natural assets, and that includes the stock of natural ecosystems, forests, rivers, land, minerals, and so on, that supply us with those essential goods and services. So it's from this natural capital stock that we see this yield of flows of valuable ecosystem goods and services. And I think that's very, very important to get that kind of definition right straight away. And we tried to illustrate this graphically through this infographic that was developed by our team at the Scottish Wildlife Trust. So we called it "Can't See the Trees for the Wood." So you can see that on the left-hand side, the value that you can generate from wood through timber and wood fuel and employment is X amount of dollars. But if you then look at that forest system and all the values that you can generate from good management, good sustainable management of that forest system, you can see that you can generate a 7 today. You can calculate this globally, so you can look at, if you're in the business of just valuing timber, it's 0.4 trillion, but if you're in the business of valuing trees and all the benefits of well-managed forests, it's 3.7 trillion, and there are ways, of course, of monetizing that. And you can drill down and look at this on a hectare by hectare basis. So this is some work from the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity study from 2014, looking at agroforestry versus monocultures of palm oil in Brazil. And you can see that if you do a full cost analysis of this, you're generating considerably more value by running an agroforestry system than you are a monoculture. And actually, you can pretty much apply this to any part of the world, anywhere, using whatever methodology you care to use, and you will come up with the same result. Monoculturalism doesn't pay. Complex ecosystems deliver a whole range of other values, and they have a higher and already 7. Another way of looking already environmentalists breaking out of their circle of wagons, because I think pretty much the tactics of environmentalists over the last few decades it's a bit of an analogy here, possibly with a protected area, and say, right, we're going to defend nature in this area, and we're not going to talk to any other sectors. We're just going to kind of defend nature, and we're really, we're going to be determined about it. But actually, what we need is environment 7. The economic sectors, and it's a way, I think, of it's a kind of maturing of the environmental agenda, and we're beginning to talk the language of economics, and we're hoping that the economists can begin to speak the language of ecology. So the World Forum on Natural Capital, it was organised by ourselves in collaboration with these 5 partners, and I have to put a shout out for our sponsors, the Scottish Government Alliance Trust and the Ministry of Economic Affairs from the Netherlands. Note that the Ministry of Economic Affairs from the Netherlands, it's kind of thanks, I couldn't pronounce that. So our patron, His Royal Highness Prince Charles, kicked the whole thing off. We had His Royal Highness Prince Charles, kind of the environment 7 delegates, This was the second one we had. The first World Forum took place in 2013. That's Inger Anderson, the Director General of the ICN. Quite a cast of speakers, and even Richard Branson called in from Necker Island, presented, apologising for the waves crashing outside his beach hut on his island. But I wanted to just distill some of the big messages and also some of the challenges that came out of that conference. And for me, there's four really big emerging agendas around the concept of natural capital, and these are them. So natural capital accounting, the idea of investable conservation products, which we've heard a little bit about, and I'll say, and we will be talking about this in the context of the Peatland Code in the breakout session. What you might call finance sector disruptors, which, you know, there are kind of early movers in the finance sector, 600 Devon waves, and the concept of an ethical charter around natural capital. So very 600 Devon. Probably the pioneers of this technique are the company Care. Many brands that you'll be very familiar with: Puma, the sportswear company, Gucci, and various other luxury brands. They have 21 brands altogether, and they've done an environmental profit and loss account for their entire operations across all 21 brands now. I don't expect you to look at the detail here, but basically what they're doing is they're looking at their environmental footprint. Then doing a valuation on that, and they're creating an environmental profit and loss account. And they're using this then as a business decision tool. So if you look at the impact, for example, of cotton in India versus organic cotton in India, you can see that environmental footprint is actually it's enormous. The enormous difference, particularly in water. So the blue bit in the pie chart is water take. So that's valued environmental profit and loss impacts per 1 kilo of conventional versus organic cotton from 2 different countries. So you can see that you can begin to use this as a business decision tool. Natural world. Probably can't see that because it's too small, but what you've got across the top are the tiers of the supply chain. So you're looking at your immediate operations. You've got 5 tiers of the supply chain. And you build the figures are essentially primary production. And then on the down axis, you've got the categories of environmental impact or dependency. So air pollution, land use, waste, water consumption, and so on. And you can see that land use in tier 5 of the supply chain is by far the biggest impact. And they've been very brave, and they've actually put a figure on what those impacts are, with a long-term view of trying to bring that figure down to 0, so they have a net positive gain potentially in the future as a business. And they're tracking that over time, and what's interesting is they're tracking out with their profits, and they're trying to decouple their environmental impact from their profits on their financial balance sheet. So you can see that their revenue went up from 2013, impact went down. Parallel to this, because there's quite a lot of methodologies out there around the world, which is great. 1,000 flowers are blooming at the moment, but there's an idea that we could kind of bring this together in a standard accounting methodology, and it's called the Natural Capital Protocol. And it will actually be launched in London on the 13th of June. So, well, I think they're probably working on it now, actually. But the idea is that at least kind of version 1.0 will be launched on the 13th of June in London. And this is effectively a qualitative, quantitative, and monetary valuation of natural capital impacts and dependencies. It means that you can compare businesses. If you look at one business that's done natural capital accounting with another business that's used a different methodology, it's very difficult to compare actually how to benchmark one against the other. But the Natural Capital Protocol will allow that benchmarking and comparisons. For that's coming. The other thing I was going to talk about was this idea of investable conservation products. So some work that Credit Suisse have done with WWF and McKinsey, they've calculated that to meet the global demand for conservation funding, investable cash flows need to be 20 to 30 times higher than they are today. We've already heard this morning. So that equates to around about 200 to 300 billion a year across the world. We're not going to solve that through a 5% increase in life funding in the EU, as has already been said. We need to get the private sector involved in investing in nature. And to do that, we need to develop measurable and verifiable products which are trusted. People need to, if you're a business investing in nature, you need to understand what the returns are, both the conservation returns, the social impact returns, and the financial returns. So to take the example of peatlands, as I say, we'll probably talk about this a little bit later on. So in the EU, 80% of peatlands have been abused and degraded in the UK for many centuries. Here you see inappropriate forestry, burning, drainage ditches. There are drainage ditches. And this landscape is hemorrhaging carbon. And you see here the scale of the erosion in some areas is actually quite astonishing. So we're losing colossal amounts of carbon and also all the other values that go with that in terms of the impacts of increased flows of water from that land, causing flooding downstream, biodiversity loss, and so on. So we developed the ICN UK committee, national committee in the UK, with a whole host of partners, including the Department of Environment and Rural Affairs, are developing. It's really in development at the moment. This peatland code, which I'm not going to go into in great detail, but it's essentially a payment for ecosystem services model. And we've crunched some of the numbers here. So we've crunched some of the damaged area of peatland. That will cost you between, say, 50 carbon and of that over a 30-year period, even with a very, very low price of carbon. Even if you're pricing carbon, amounts of carbon will pay back within a 20-30 year period. So we're moving away from saying, okay, we want to restore these landscapes because it's the right thing to do, and they may provide some benefit. As we've already said, it will give you a return of, £10 or euros in the longer term. And getting these hard figures down, I think, helps make the case for the investment. The other thing that's happening is, and possibly this is the most exciting area of natural capital, is the investors are actually waking up to this and understanding that the money that they lend to businesses could be under risk if they don't understand actually the natural capital risks of where that money's going. So the obvious example that springs to mind is the National Australia Bank, for example, is big going. So the lender to the agricultural sector in Australia, unless you can demonstrate to us that you've understood and you're going, so the stock of natural capital in your farm, then we're going to put up the cost of finance because you're a bigger risk to us. So the institutional investors are saying, okay, unless you in the kind of tier of the middle tier there are actually demonstrating to us that you have an understanding of natural capital and its sustainable management, it's going to cost you more money, or we're not going to lend to you at all. Same thing is happening with Sumitomo Bank in Japan, who are increasingly saying to their borrowers, please submit an environmental profit and loss account before we give you any more finance. The last thing I just wanted to say was, I think the ethical dimension to this is really important. The first World Forum on Natural Capital did have a handful of protesters outside in bowler hats, and they thought it was all about big business, taking over the environmental agenda. It's not. It's absolutely not about the opposite to that. It's about the environment. It's about internalize the costs and basically pillaged this free natural capital to make this internalizing those costs in your economic models. So it's exactly the opposite. But nevertheless, you know, there are, I think, some big ethical questions, and this issue about the incommensurability of biodiversity. A ton of carbon is a ton of carbon. There's no such thing as a ton of biodiversity. It's incommensurable from one place to another. So whether you can say we can use the markets in the future to kind of trade that biodiversity and make the market work is, I think, still an ethical question that we need to grapple with, and we will need some very, very strong regulations if we are going to go down that route in any major way. So we did have an interesting debate at the World Forum on ethical. Everybody's smiling, which was good. So I was expecting fireworks, but everybody ended up smiling at the end of it. So I think we can find a way through this, and there is a motion actually going to the World Conservation Congress in Hawaii in September on natural capital, which will, I hope, signal that we will, as the IUCN globally, develop an ethical. So, just to summarise, 4 challenges then: finance sector adoption, internalising externalities. I've already talked about this. I think that is the deregulatory agenda at the moment is obviously a challenge for us, because I think we need to set some policy context, and the policy makers really need to signal intent here. There is this ideological inertia, which, you know, the environmentalists are not really helping themselves, because they're getting bogged down in some of the complex ethical arguments, whilst there's still degradation of ecosystems globally. We really need to get on with it. And obviously we're dealing with this issue of the complexity of nature, as I've already mentioned, the incommensurability of, you know, tons of biodiversity. Setter, so I probably should have gone at the beginning, but anyway, I hope that was interesting for you. Thanks. Interesting for you.
On the table, because we're going straight away to the panel, so I invite all speakers to come forward and have a seat on one of the high tables, because we're just going audience and to see what kind of debates we had on natural capital, on rewilding Europe, on stewardship, and all the other concepts that were flying around. So see if we can get some red threads. Okay, 2 tables, please. Yeah, thanks. I'll just sit here for a moment, and we'll have a bit of a shorter discussion because we lost so much time in the beginning. So if you have any questions, raise your arm and tell who you are and what you want to ask to one of the panelists. So please take this opportunity. Sir? Yeah, go ahead.
Let me venture. First of all, my congratulations for doing such a story.
Sorry.
And one of them is 2 Degrees Investing Initiative based in Paris. Not-for-profit initiative. My question initiative has been to quite some extent been addressed. Focus on the issue of the methodologies used in by civil society, by finance, and in the economy. And they pertain to, and there we need a long-term approach to deal with indicators. Indicators may be biophysical. A lot of work is being done on that. Mm-hmm. There are also about indicators used by investors and long-term people who operate in long-term finance. And you see work being done on the basis of, for instance, analysis by true cost on what happens in the economy and the use of indicators to make a difference in a company. For instance, the water risk monetizer developed by true cost. The problem is that there's still a lot of uncertainty about how to measure the biophysical indicators and consumption-based system of accounting would be a helpful step, and not only resource productivity. I'll stop here to observe those issues, but my question is, how could we altogether have a closer look at the consistency and the coherence needed in these different approaches, and at the level of the EU preferably, to make sure that we will go in the right direction? Because if you account in an economic environmental accounting system in the right analysis of the biophysical indicators, you may go totally wrong. That is my question.
Yeah. That's a very, very, very fair point. I hope there's someone from the European Commission in the audience. There were several people from the Commission coming, but I'm not sure if they'll actually shut up because of the strike. And also maybe after the breakout session that Eva Meyerhofer from the European Investment Bank can say something about this. But let me first look at the panel. Of course, Johnny, you have some thoughts about this, but maybe also Ilko or Willem, if one of you has a thought, or Marta.
I can say something.
Yeah, you take it.
Okay. It's working. Okay. Oddly enough, I'm this week going on Thursday to Cambridge University to a very intensive 2-day session with Caring that are trying to explore, and it plays to my very, very last point, actually, the complexity of nature issue. Very, very last point. Environmental profit and loss models is actually it's a really difficult challenge. How do you actually do it? How do you actually so it's work in progress, and I'm not sure that there's a kind of magic bullet solution really or answer to your question. I think it is work in progress. In Scotland, we're developing with the Scottish Government and its agencies and the NGOs together something called ecosystem health indicators, which are trackable over time and could be applied at catchment level. So you can take a catchment and you can say, okay, these 10 key indicators for the kind of biophysical health of that catchment. We'll take a baseline. We'll track that over time, and then you can set targets. You can set 10-year targets and say, you know, we want to improve the ecosystem health index by 20% in the next 10 years, and focus then your public or private funds. So I think the whole area of ecosystem health indicators is a really, really interesting one. This is a really some health indicator. Yeah, it's a shame we haven't got anybody from the Commission here because they might have been able to respond to that.
Yeah. No, it's
Some health indicators is a really
psychologist. What I found over the last few years is that scientists make it too difficult and too complex, and that means that people are
health indicators is a really
ecosystem or payment for ecosystem services or ecological functionality, all these, you know, jargon blurbs. So what we did is we really brought it down, also the return on nature, to basically measuring of increase of species, measuring of increase of water table, measuring of increase of canopy, and measuring of increase of topsoil. And you can, you know, there's a lot of things under that. Yeah, species, native or not native, all these things, but you can measure that. The most difficult thing to measure is the inspirational capital. And that is the key opener and the key door for people to do things differently. And we found that as the most important challenge to work on ecological restoration or landscape restoration. We try to avoid even the word ecological restoration because farmers really know very well what they do. And they know also very well that the things they do, pushed by all kinds of markets and systems, are not good for the environment on the long run. But they're squeezed in thinking for only, you know, for tomorrow and not in 20 years. If you open their mindset and give them inspiration by asking their mindset and give them in 20 years, they come with real can help them to make it happen. And but the farmers or the land, knows very well what to do. Yep. So the answer for me is we have all the to know in such a way that people will be involved instead of you know, pushing aside.
Yes, I completely agree with my two colleagues in the table. And communication, sensibilization of the society, it's a very important point. If we have a society that understands the importance of nature value and the services of the ecosystems, then they will push also the public sector, the politicians. Sometimes, I don't know if there is any other politician in the room, but we feel very alone. Even in our own political parties, even in the government, trying to explain all these things. That's why I think we are trying to put numbers on it, to make them understand, to make the Ministry of Economic Affairs, the Ministry of Health sometimes. We are trying to link the health and nature to make them understand that it's better to invest in nature-based solutions. That if we invest in that, maybe then we can save money on something that we need to put in numbers. We have the tools, but sometimes we don't.
Thank you. Okay, then just take a few more other questions and then for the coffee break. You had a question?
I'm from the Commission, but I'm not in a position to answer questions. Rather, I would like to ask a question to the speakers, both in your presentations and in some of this discussion here. Questions.
Thank you. Sorry. This is also for the web stream important. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's on. It's on.
You're all talking about trying to harness an economic system and to see how private incentives can be allied with natural values, with biodiversity. But in your discussions, you also touched at various times the role of the public sector. I'd like to ask you, based that you're trying to move towards sort of a free market appreciation of biodiversity, what role do you see for the public sector in trying to promote this approach, taking into account the sort of hesitation for more regulation at the moment, taking into account limited public budgets, taking into account different competencies at different levels? What is it that you would see as the role of the public sector? That you would...
Okay, that also points again, which is the deregulation challenge that we're all facing at the moment. One of the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal 15, which is about restoration of terrestrial 15. Under that Sustainable Development Goal, actually does commit the signature. Actually does all the governments that have signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals to actually incorporate ecosystem and biodiversity, alleviation strategies, planning documents. I can't remember the exact wording, but there is a commitment. It's a soft commitment to go in that direction by 2020. So it's actually we're going to move on. So I think that's something certainly that under more favourable conditions, the European Commission, I think could have helped with in terms of bringing forward suggestions for a directive based around that. Sorry, and then the second one was around business regulation. If you speak to Surian Cheshire, who's the former chairman of Kingfisher Group, which is a large company in the UK, he'll say, bring on the regulation. We want government to say to us, you must do natural capital accounting, you must publish in detail the impacts and dependencies of your business across your supply chains in a way which is easily understandable and comparable with other businesses of over a certain size, because they're already innovating, they're already ahead of the curve. So you're actually seeing business leaders calling for more regulation. They want a level playing field. So we need to see the early movers basically kind of put it, bring on some appropriate to make the slaggards, the blackguards do this.
Also, businesses calling Catalonia for being regulated?
Yes, I think so, but they would prefer. I think so, but sensitivity, and sometimes if we regulate in our region or in our country, then they feel that maybe same. So I think in these cases, and we've seen with all the presentations, that this is a huge challenge. All the presentations, I would ask to the European Commission or to the European politicians in this case to regulate.
Two gentlemen, you both have a multi-stakeholder approach. How's it working for the public sector?
Well, I think one of the most important things is, for us at least, you know, when we're trying to change financing models, is that a lot of the public financing models are on one hand trying to achieve one objective, but they're different that do exactly the contrary. So as long as you have two financing models, subsidy models, whatever, contradicting each other, then yeah, you as a small NGO can try whatever you want. I think one of the most important is that the Commission, at least in Life Nature, has now said we launched the Natural Capital Financing Facility because we want to do a pilot with getting a more business-like financing model of nature rather than subsidies and grant money. I think the market, they will always go for the low-hanging fruits, and this is not low-hanging fruit. So you have to be very wise with using your grant and subsidy wise with using to keep something that will stop as soon as you stop doing it, but to transform the model into something that is more, I think, grant financing. And that's what we're trying to do with, for instance, Rewilding Europe Capital. We try to build business cases around it so that these models become self-fulfilling rather than, I think...
Willem, to close, what's your vision on governance?
No, first of all, I think many, I agree, of course, very much what you've said, and I recognize what you've said. What we do is that we work in large areas. So in the Spanish context, we work in the 600,000 large areas in Andalusia. What we do there is we build with this framework a kind of a jigsaw puzzle so that people know, farmers know, landowners know, what their piece of the puzzle is and what they can do to restore and make the land productive again. We involve local mayors and we involve local politicians as well as local ministries. And if they understand what their position is and what they can do to facilitate this, participate in that. And they're very eager to look into what are the obstacles to achieve a restored landscape and what are the opportunities for local governments to do so. So that is a bottom-up that we do. Master plan, and you also involve them in the funding of particular areas, especially natural zones and so on. What we also see is that so that is making the bridge between landowners, land users, as well as public officials. What we see is that for the public domain, it's very difficult to go higher up the level, and there you have forces, as you said, that are driving the degradation process. So in this case, in Spain and in many Mediterranean areas, deforestation is driven by the force of European Union policies, while restoration is not subsidized or not stimulated.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have to close the panel now because we will have to go to the next part of this little conference, which is all about interactivity and breakout groups. We've designated 4 different rooms for you. Common land. So when you registered, you gave a preference to one of the 4 breakout. The participants list if you forgot which group you preferred. Common Land will stay in his room, so there will be a 10-minute break here just to get some coffee and refreshment and go to the bathroom or have a smoke. But in 10 minutes we'll start again. Common Land will stay here. There are 2 other rooms also next to this place, and it's marked, and it's the Catalan government, which is next to this bigger room. Rewilding Europe will be just opposite. It's also noted. And then for those interested in the Scottish Wildlife Trust and the UK peatland program and everything else, you have to follow Johnny and Hilde upstairs to the fourth floor. But just notify us and we'll get you there. So now it's time for some coffee refreshments, and see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.